Everyone. Welcome to the Rare Book Room. My name is Nicholas. I help direct the events here at Strand Bookstore. For a little bit of history, the Strand was founded in 1927 by the Bass family over on 4th Avenue's Book Row, which stretched from Union Square to Astor Place. After almost 90 years, Strand is the sole survivor, still run by the Bass family, and still housing new and used books, some in this room from the 15th century. Tonight we are excited to host author Anuradha Bhagwati as we celebrate the launch of her book, Unbecoming. Anuradha is a writer, activist, yoga and meditation teacher, and Marine Corps veteran. She founded the Service Women's Action Network, which brought national attention to sexual violence in the military and helped overturn the ban on women in combat. Yes, that's deserving of... Anuradha is a regular media commentator on issues related to national security, women's rights, civil rights, and mental health, and is the recipient of numerous awards. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, the Washington Post, Politico, Foreign Affairs, and the New Republic. Joining her is scholar and author Brittany Cooper. Brittany is an associate professor in the Department of Women's and Gender Studies at Rutgers University, New Brunswick. She has written several books, including Beyond Respectability, The Intellectual Thought of Race Women, and Eloquent Rage, a Black feminist discovers her superpower. And she co-authored and edited the Crunk Feminist Collection, I love that title, and also writes articles for Cosmopolitan and The Salon. With all that out of the way, please join me in welcoming Anuradha, Brittany, and Unbecoming to the Strand.
Good evening, everybody. So, it is really an honor to be here and in conversation with my friend who we met 7 years ago this year. When we were learning how to talk to the media more effectively at a program at Women's Media Center, and look at how far you've come. But I knew Anuradha was a badass way back then, and so I'm so proud to be in conversation with you. So it's an honor to be able to talk to you about your new book, Unbecoming. So I'm going to start with the first question that I know is on everyone's minds. Is this title related to Michelle Obama's Becoming at all?
I wish it were. Yeah, I feel like I came up with this title before she came up with hers, right? But,
right.
No, I took the phrase from Conduct Unbecoming, which is a military justice phrase. Mm-hmm. Gosh, I thank you so much for coming, everyone. This is just it's amazing to see you all. And hi, Mom and Dad. I'm getting a lot of waves. It's a phrase that refers to behavior you're not supposed to engage in, but I really took the gendered version of this phrase, both in terms of military justice in the way that women are punished more than men for acts that would not be considered illegal in the civilian world, but are in the military, and also, you know, women have been called unbecoming since the beginning of time. So
yeah, I mean, and I want to talk a little bit about your process of becoming. And so one of the things that you sort of vividly render here is the pressure of being, a brown girl, daughter of immigrants, of highly accomplished immigrants' parents, the pressures that come with that, and the way that it sort of reverberates throughout your life, that you are highly educated, but it seems you never feel like you quite fit in the places where you are. And then you are still frequently the lone voice, the lone female voice or queer voice or brown voice in spaces. And so talk to us a little bit about that, about the pressures of that.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking earlier about how this is being branded as a military memoir, but I never considered it a military memoir. This was very much a personal story about being the daughter of immigrants and growing up in in the Northeast, where as a kid, this is a very common experience for brown kids. I thought I was white. I thought I was Jewish. I thought all the things because this is who I was surrounded by. These were my friends and classmates, and then realized, much to my shock, that I was not, and had to then relearn who I was. And of course, that I'm still relearning who I am. I think it's an endless thing. But it was hard. I mean, the great thing about getting older, or getting to middle age, is I am able to appreciate what my parents went through. Also, being immigrants, coming all the way, coming by ship to the United States. That's insane to even think about. But and the sacrifices they made to get here, and then when they got here, the sacrifices they made so that I could have an education. And that's a classic immigrant story. Yeah. But the brownness is not something, I don't know that they or I was prepared to reckon with.
And you said in this book that after all this, I mean, you've written a book that is so fiercely about gender, about violence, about the ways that women are underestimated over and over again, and yet you come to the conclusion that brownness is the thing that is sort of most apparent for you as you move in these spaces. So I actually didn't anticipate that that's how you would think about it. And so can you say something about that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't anticipate that either. I think this came to me a couple of years ago, and when I first met Brittany, I went by Anu, which was, it's a nickname, and my parents are still allowed to call me Anu, but I went back to Anuradha in a very political way, a conscious way. I remember practicing saying my name out loud because I hadn't said it in so many years.
Wow.
And also like growing up in a very white culture. I didn't grow up speaking Gujarati fluently. It's in my conscious or subconscious maybe, but there's a little shame around like not knowing my parents' native tongue, and that's also a very common first generation immigrant experience. And so, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's right. When we were preparing for this, I had been calling Anuradha Anu for a number of years. And, I'm really thankful just for the courage of saying, call me by my name, right? My actual name, because it turns out that white privilege really shows up in this sort of ability to pronounce like Polish and Czech names and all these sort of complicated European names. Y'all know white people can pronounce Eastern European names just fine, but when it comes to like African names or Indian names, folks are like, we don't know how to say it. Yes, you do. Learn, right?
I felt it coming too. I remember the day, and I wrote about this. I remember the day that I shortened my name, and I was preparing for cable news appearances, and there's like one too many producers, that I felt like I was not being recognized. I was invisible everywhere I went just because of my name, and that's another experience. Growing up, I see this in Asian American communities constantly, like the entire Asian American community, East Asian, South Asian, the whole works, right? And that's a decision that many of our parents make too when they choose, either Judeo-Christian or American-sounding names, whatever that means, right? And so. But I felt like I was losing something. Like I don't write about this, but my mother chose my name very consciously. No, it's not an easy name to pronounce. Like it's hard for me to pronounce it correctly, right? But it's
girl,
important.
It's not that hard, but it's really not that hard.
Okay.
And I'm just saying that in part because, we are taught to think that we're difficult, or that folks acknowledging us and our humanity and even our name requires extra labor. And I reject that. Right. I want to ask you about, like a very sort of American thing. So you talk about the movies Top Gun and G.I. Jane in this book. And, folks of a certain age have a deep appreciation for those films. And so you talk about them as films that shaped your perception of the military and of a particular sort of self. And so I wonder if is your sense that pop culture has changed? Like, is the military still romanticized in those same ways? And you don't talk about this as a thing that really did damage, but just like as a moment where you felt like this created a sense of possibility for you. Do you feel like there are films now or other moments in pop culture that have sort of created that sense of possibility for young people?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my relationship to Hollywood and the kind of military Hollywood establishment has changed a lot in the last decade or two. I don't watch military movies or military shows. It brings back a lot of problems for me. So it's triggering. But also there's this sense of and I do write about this in the book. It's painful to watch an industry or the entertainment industry sensationalize veteran stories. Even if those stories are not experiences that I have lived, but definitely my friends and colleagues have lived through. Anytime something feels like war pornography or victim pornography, I am so turned off by that, and I cannot participate in that. And so it's hard for me to watch all of that. Back when I was a kid, Top Gun, we went through all that, but it's it was powerful.
No, that makes sense. I mean, that's the thing, right? It's like we get woke, we learn more, and then all the fun stuff is like, it's not fun anymore, in the best possible way. One of the things that you talk about as a young person who went to the military and who also, even in the military, what is striking to me in this book is that you are, by turns, deeply feminist. You are pro-military, you are queer, you are brown, you're skeptical of U.S. colonialism. In these places, you talk about the sort of moral challenge of what it means to be part of a violent project where sometimes you're killing people who look a lot like you, right? Or not you, but the military project has to do that. And I wonder how you reconcile all these competing identities.
I haven't yet.
Okay.
That's the honest answer. I mean, it's something I wrestle with every day. I don't know. Maybe the next generation will figure it out. I mean, I even yesterday I was with family and we're talking about my uncles who helped. I mean, they were insurgents, right? They helped overthrow the British Empire. They were on the streets. That's
great.
And
we need that.
Well, we did need that. And does that square with my experience? It's an entirely different experience. I didn't join the military for the same reasons that my uncles were doing their work. So no, it's a lot to process, and writing this book helped me process some of that. But being a feminist Marine, I don't know that the word feminist was in my consciousness when I was in uniform. I just knew that within me there was so much happening that I could not be quiet about. There was too much mistreatment of the Marines I was working with for me to stay quiet and do nothing. Right. And so if I was a feminist in uniform, I mean, that's what it looked like. Just saying no to people, saying, no, you cannot do that.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about what inspired you to create the Service Women's Action Network. And I want you to talk to us about it because we're in a moment where we're having a resurgence of public conversation about sexual violence. But before that resurgence, you were on the front lines of helping create a context for much of that work to be done.
Yeah, when I left the Marines, I mean, I was hurting because I had filed a sexual harassment investigation against a fellow officer, and it was a long, drawn-out investigation in which he was essentially promoted during the investigation. The Marine Corps did not take it seriously, but the senior officers I worked for swept the incident under the rug. And this was after sort of several years of seeing the same thing, sexual assault allegations swept under the rug. And these are Marines that I worked with and for. And so I was demoralized, right? That hit me personally. And in the process too, I wasn't just like witnessing all of these experiences. I was also experiencing them as a victim. And so, daily harassment, in that last unit when I filed the harassment investigation, I had to make a choice. I had to literally look at myself in the mirror and conjure up my values. The Marine Corps talks about its core values: honor, courage, and commitment. And when you're a Marine, this is like the stuff you breathe and live in constantly. But those words meant nothing to me at that point when I got out, because I saw far too many officers doing the wrong thing. And so I stuck my neck out. I sat one of my junior Marines down who was being sexually harassed, and I was like, what do you want me to do? I'll do it. And she said, ma'am, you're the only one who can do something about this lieutenant who's harassing us. And I knew that was the case, right? I had more rank than my sergeant. So I went outside the chain of command, which is really what you've got to do in the military. I firmly believe that. All the policy changes on the books right now about taking taking commander authority away in cases of sexual assault. We created that, actually. We were the voices behind those changes, but it needs to happen. So,
yeah. And you are a pioneer in another way, and I think in a deeply intimate way, which is that you were also queer in the military during the Don't Ask, Don't Tell era, right? And in a way that, in which I think that we always need to sort of bear witness to the fact that everyone didn't have the context that we had during the Obama years where you could sort of maybe be more yourself. What's your sense of things now? Like, it's rapidly changing. We made progress, then we've taken some steps back under this current administration. What do you feel the prospects look like for queer folks in the military? Are they having a better experience than you had, or is it still a challenge?
I feel like everyone's having their own individual experience right now. I mean, the horrifying thing is the president's work to unravel the transgender rights,
yeah,
right? I mean,
absolutely.
that's the issue on the table right now. Yeah. It's just abominable that in an all volunteer force, when young women and men are joining during a time of war, that anyone would have the audacity to say, no, you can't be a soldier, right? That is unconscionable. As far as folks who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, I mean, I think even to this day, it matters sort of what branch of service you're working in and what unit you're in, right? There are some folks who are out and proud and feel quite safe, right, in their units. And then there are those who wouldn't dare to come out to their commanders or to their peers, right? So,
And I want to talk a little bit about the way that being in the Marines, how it figures for you in terms of identity, in that you both deeply embrace it. And it's interesting because the military seemed to be a place for you to undo some of the pressures of becoming as a queer, daughter of immigrants, as a brown girl in America. And at the same time, so in some ways it helped you to unbecome the things that were problematic about that experience, but also so much of your life has been about not becoming or undoing the things you became in the military. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, this book is so much about identity and belonging for me. Yeah. And, I kind of ran away from home because I didn't quite feel I belonged. My lovely parents put a little pressure on me when I was growing up. Sure. And yeah, I had to figure out who I was and what I really wanted to do. Yeah. And so I chose the most extreme thing that was available to me. I joined the Marines, and I realized that was maybe the only thing I was gonna do at that point in my life. It was very rebellious and a little reckless, because I didn't go in knowing a lot about what I was doing, but I learned fast. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, really, the story of Unbecoming is that I did find my voice in the Marines. Like, I came up against such authority, right? Such a wall of, like, women cannot do this, brown people should not be doing this, and queer people definitely should not. And so, faced with all of that, like, my response was hell no, right? and so I learned to speak for myself.
I love that.
Yeah.
And so part of what you have been thinking about and speaking about has been how we change conditions for service women, both those who formerly served and those who currently serve. But you have talked really explicitly, and you do in this book, about feeling left behind or overlooked or dismissed, both by Congress, sort of in the earlier period of your work, and then even as the Me Too movement emerged, sort of being left on the back burner. What do you feel? What would you like to see change in these places?
I mean, we live in such a challenging political climate in terms of anything, even service member and veterans related. I mean, regardless of gender. When we started doing this activism, this was about 2009. Sexual assault was not a thing you could talk about freely on the Hill, and we were fearless. I banded together with a bunch of women veterans from the different services, most of them enlisted, and I realized suddenly, because I'd been so kind of marginalized in the Marines as somebody who was speaking out, that actually mistreatment of service women was a common experience. I met many, many women who had been sexually assaulted or harassed, who'd been discriminated against, who'd been kicked out under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And so we were fearless. We had nothing left to lose, right? So we spoke fearlessly to members of Congress. And these congressional aides would look at us like we were crazy because we were not playing the same, game, or using the same language, I should say, as the older, more traditional veteran service organizations, which still are mostly run by an older generation of white male veterans. And, you know, all of a sudden we were literally just saying the word sexual assault on the Hill, you know, turned heads. But then we would demand that somebody do something about it. And of course, survivors have been telling their stories for decades, right?
Yes.
On camera, off camera, to congressional offices and everyone else. Has that radically changed things? Absolutely not. But when we arrived, veteran service organizations had not raised these issues. Yeah, I mean, the first time I testified before Congress, it was before Bob Filner, who was a serial harasser. And, you know, no one knew at the time except his victims, right? Maybe his staffers, I don't know. But so there's all of this stuff was happening. And, you know, meanwhile, Tarana Burke was doing her work. I didn't know her at the time.
Sure.
You know, fast forward to today, I do feel like the military has been completely left out of the Me Too movement. And unfortunately, we've created a political climate and system in which we can let that happen, in which it's an all volunteer force. Most people in the United States today don't have personal stakes in what happens to young men and women in the military, right? And so we have to really remind ourselves, if we are civilians or, you know, or we don't have family members serving in the military, that these kids matter, because they will be left to their commanders without us, right? And their commanders are not always looking out for the best interests of the victims and their units.
How do we reconcile these battles between feminists, though, around, you know, that much of our pro-military rhetoric is seen as sort of right-wing rhetoric in this country, and then you have feminists who are seen as being on the left. And it seems to me that challenge, which you have worked at the core of, you've actually figured out in the organizing how to reconcile it better than most folks have. And so what are some tips as we think about this? Because as someone, when I was reading your book and, like, on the one hand admiring, like, she really is like a military badass. Like, she kind of is G.I. Jane. She's like, you can't tell, like, I'm not trying to offend you, but I'm trying to say that sort of bravado. Like, look, if I were going into war, this is who I'm going behind. I'm just following Anuradha right behind, right? Yeah, give her some. No, it's dope. And you will find out about that when you read this book. I was like, oh shit, I did not know this is who you were. And I totally love it. So also, though, you know, we have this kind of performance of wokeness where we're like, you know, where the woke thing is to be anti-military, even though we should acknowledge that folks in the military defend our rights to come and sit and have the conversations that we want to be having. And so how do you, what tips do you have so that we can talk to each other in ways that aren't polarizing? Because it seems like that's really important. If women are actually being physically harmed and violated, then we can't actually just throw them on the chopping block because we disagree politically, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think language is really important in this conversation. I think that most people who don't have a relationship with the military, who are interested in helping veterans, are occasionally a little too sensitive, a little too cautious. And so I would encourage people to have conversations with folks who've served, but go in with very open-ended expectations. And so, you know, I mean, even when we were branding SWAN as an organization early on, there was a tendency for I would call it leftist ideology to kind of present itself. It's like, well, if women are being harassed and assaulted, then the military is all bad. There is an argument to be made for that. It's not one that we chose to support. My thinking around this was, if there are veterans being hurt, if there are service members being hurt in uniform, they may have conservative ideology for whatever reason. Maybe it's their parents, maybe they're pro-gun, whatever it is. But if they're hurt, then we need to focus on healing the hurt. And so politics is irrelevant in my reaching out to somebody who's hurting. What I think about Trump or Nader or whoever, right, is irrelevant to this human being who has been hurt by a brother in arms, right? All of that other stuff is just a distraction, because if that person doesn't reach out, then I've lost them, right? Then they think they're alone, and then I've failed them, right? So and this is also one of the amazing things about, you know, I have a lot of veteran friends who, I mean, we cross the entire political spectrum. It has been very hard since the Trump election to maintain some of those bridges, but some of them have been maintained. And I refuse to cut those cords. Because there is a humanity there, a shared experience, and an ability to remember what it's like to defend one another, even though we are different colors, we come from different faiths, and I have to believe that there's something good in that.
No, that's really, I mean, look, that's helpful. We want to figure out how we can actually win together. I want to ask you about rage.
I want to ask you about rage. Yeah.
I want to ask you about it because so much of the journey in this book is about anger and about your contending with it and sometimes not knowing what to do with it, and really trying to sort of be in relationship to it. And I wonder what you might say about your journey around rage and around what you feel like your relationship is to it today, because you have worked really hard to have a different set of relationships to the challenges that you sort of went to the military to try to solve or to run away from, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was one of these frustrated, angry teenagers, like many, and I did have some outlets to express myself. You know, I had sports, I had basketball, I had an amazing set of friends, some of whom are in the audience, and I felt supported. But you know, in the Marines, I was unsupported, and you know, there were so few of us at the time. 7% of the Marine Corps was female. That's not a lot of women in an organization that also puts down women systemically, and so. You know, even to be physically in proximity with another woman was considered very risky, right? You're weak by association, right? So we just kind of avoided one another, which is horrifying, and also very common to the experiences of any marginalized population, right? And so I learned misogyny in the Marines unconsciously until it was challenged, right? Like a veteran friend of mine said, like, it's there, like examine your feelings around this, whether it's self-hatred, you know, whatever you had to do to cope or survive, even though I was also defending women, but I had to unlearn all of those behaviors. Rage, I mean, here was the hardest part. It was when I came out of the Marines, I was physically injured. So I couldn't hit things anymore. I couldn't kick the shit out of things anymore. You know, I was a close combat instructor in the Marines. And so I was physically working out a lot of anger, whether it was on male bodies I was training with, right? Or just running hard, you know, up and down hills. I couldn't do that anymore. So I had to sit with it, which is the most frustrating thing in the world. You know, and veterans will tell you this all the time if they're physically injured. And so will, you know, human beings, period, right? It's like, so then what do you do with all of that emotion sitting in your body when you can't work it out, right?
What do you do?
So, you know, I discovered yoga, I discovered meditation, and, you know, and I'm not talking about super athletic yoga. I'm talking about, like, you know, the stuff that is gentle and slow and kind to your joints. And I had to process the feelings that I was covering up by running and pounding on things all day long, right? Like, for the first time, I had to face the rage. I had to face the frustration and the hurt and the pain. That is hard work, you know? Yeah. I could not pound it out. And it's, yeah, it was taken like 10 years, 15 years. It's a long process.
Yeah, look, you bodied this rage like you used to body people in these combat competitions, you know, and so there's this sort of similar sensibility where you refuse to be conquered by the things that would try to take you under, and that's, you know, it's dope to sort of see your journey around that. Gentleness is interesting because I did want to talk to you about your yoga practice, although before I do that, I want to say there was this moment in the book where you talked about when you got knocked out. And you, but the thing that's interesting is that you talked about sort of waking up and smiling as though, you know, you had survived it, right? So, and I wonder, and I wasn't sure how to read the moment. Like, I didn't know whether to read it as triumph that, you know, of gender parity, right? That you as a woman were being taken seriously in the ring in that way or on the mat, or as evidence of just how far away from self-love you sort of were. How do you think about it?
It's amazing that you honed in on that passage, because I remember my editor was asking the same thing during an earlier version of the manuscript. All of the above. I mean, there was definitely some of wanting to prove to the guys who were like all of them much larger, hulking guys, right? I was training with people so much heavier and stronger than me. And I wanted to prove that I could take a hit. I wasn't afraid to, like, come at me with all of your force, all of your weight, just pound me, right? Like, I will not fall, right? So I worked with this amazing colonel who was this terrifying kind of psychological operative style Marine with 30, 40 years of infantry experience by the time he retired. And he was the one training me, and he wanted me to quit. I refused to quit. Like, my knees were blown. I was in some physical pain, right? And again, I think it was the second woman at that point to go through this black belt martial arts training program. And I just refused to. I would just muscle my way through, just sheer will, because I had to. If I failed, then what about the other women, right? Like, what kind of, and it's a completely self-destructive way of living, right? Like, I just ended up hurting myself more, but I wouldn't have done it any other way.
Because in some ways, for women to be, one of the things that you are a fierce advocate for is for women to be in combat roles, right? And so in order for them to do that, they have got to be able to sort of handle this kind of brutality. And they are, right? They're doing it, right? And so how do you square, so sometimes I feel like there is this conflict where you both deeply admire this, believe in it, and also I think I read you as worrying about the sustainability of it long term. Like, do you feel like women can, this is the thing I'm asking you, given what you have been through, do you feel like women can go into the military, even in an environment where you have worked hard and things have changed in large part because of work you have done, and come out and be well and thrive in the toughest roles, right? In combat, in infantry, in all of these sort of places? What is your sense?
Yeah, I do. And I guess by way of background, and there are actually some amazing people here who made this change for and with us, but we had to sue the Pentagon to open up combat assignments for women.
I told y'all she was a badass. Okay.
No, and the ACLU represented us, 4 incredible servicewomen who, were still in uniform at the time, taking on the Pentagon, taking on the Secretaries of Defense, right? And saying, no, like, we want to go to Ranger School. We want to do these things. Just give us the opportunity, level the playing field. Let's see what a military built on meritocracy actually looks like. Don't tell us we can't be Navy SEALs. Let us prove to you that we can, right? And then, of course, now 4 or 5 years later, 6 years later, we have Marine infantry officers and Army infantry officers. This is amazing to me. Not surprising at all, but it's, I celebrate every time a woman graduates from one of these schools that was historically closed to women. Do I think they can do it? They already are doing it. So it's not up for me to, it's not up to me to judge them. The sad thing is even as all this was happening, we had a Secretary of Defense as recently as 4 or 5 months ago, Secretary Mattis, who publicly said, to young people who were serving, the jury's still out on women in the infantry. You cannot say that as a Secretary of Defense. You just can't, right? So, and he was probably one of the best people serving in the president's administration at the time, but that sends the wrong message, right? So women had already been serving in combat, hundreds of thousands, before we even sued the Pentagon to open up these combat positions to women.
Wow.
They're already doing it.
Yeah. One of the things we talked about is sort of tangentially related to that, but precisely because of that valorization of strength that is real, actual strength, you also work on the side of this where you have to, get women to acknowledge the ways in which they've been victimized. And so how do you balance the need to make visible victimization among a group of women who have built lives around the fact that they're very, very strong, sort of preternaturally strong, stronger than any of us is ever interested in being on our best day, right? Yeah. How do you square those things?
still with many of my veteran friends, it's a sensitive conversation. So nobody wants to be seen as a victim, including me. But I've come to a place where I'm very comfortable talking about my pain, my feelings, right? That what is going on the inside of me. And I feel blessed that I can do that and this is not just true for women, this is true for anyone who serves. Like, there's such stigma about emotional well-being, emotional health, pain, right? We have this veteran suicide crisis as we speak, right? And this is in part why. It's not just that veterans have seen horrible things. It is that there's such a compartmentalization of doing these things with weapons, closing your mind off to things like feelings and memories and pain, and then examining that, and so again, it goes back to the sort of really treating somebody with humanity and being patient and kind, letting them come to their own conclusions on their own time with their own words. My experience is very, very unique. I mean, not a lot of Marines or soldiers look like me, have my background, right? I think that, and I said this last week in front of a large group of military veterans, that today I wouldn't be able to serve in the military today in the climate that we live in, because who I am, everything I believe in, is under attack by people in charge of the military. 15 years ago, 10 years ago, it was different. It was different. Although arguably it's safer to be a woman in the military today because of all of our work. There's a lot going on there.
The irony. Yeah. I want to ask you one last question, and then we'll open it up and have a little dialogue. So you've talked a lot about your own process of healing, and you really chose a counterintuitive path. And so for all of the sort of the strength, the brutality, the regimented nature of military life, you have, embraced yoga as being central to your healing process. And I wonder about that. I wonder if you can just talk to us a little bit about the ways in which healing is nonlinear when you're sort of wired to want sort of linear results, right? What has that process been like? I
mean, some of this was about connecting to my cultural heritage too. And, the funny part of this for me was my parents were not all that supportive of the yoga world. And maybe for good reason. It has become a bit of an industry. But
dominated by white girls. Weird.
Absolutely. And so in the end, it's been a little disillusioning being this brown girl, but an Indian girl teaching yoga. What has been a blessing for me is my students, who are all veterans, do not look like the typical yoga classroom. They're not skinny women. They're certainly not skinny white women. Certainly not. They're mostly guys wearing, shorts and t-shirts, raggedy sweatshirts. I mean, there's absolutely none of this kind of effort to like change your body, force yourself into some place. People just kind of come in as they are with their stuff. So it's been incredible for me. Yeah.
I love that. All right. So let's give it up for Anuradha and this lovely book. And now we'll take some questions.
We have a standing mic right here if anyone has questions.
Come to the mic.
I think people might still be processing what you've been talking about. If you have further things to talk about, go right ahead. I'm sure someone will think of something.
Yep, no worries. So, I do have, I got questions. Look, this book here's the thing to know about this book. It's a page turner, right? Like, you're a wonderful storyteller. So you're reading and I'm like, no, and then who did what? And now what's going to happen next? Like, it's really a riveting read. One of the things that is interesting is I did want to talk to you about that skepticism around yoga, because you are very much like, I'm kind of agnostic, but it's a spiritual practice for you, right? even though you're sort of like, I don't know that I believe in all the woo-woo stuff about it, but it sort of works. So, I mean, that's the way that I read you to be talking about it. Is that how it feels still? That, like that?
Yeah, but I don't do a lot of the physical stuff anymore because in part I've been turned off by the kind of yoga culture, the industry.
Okay.
In part, I'm too injured to do all that physical stuff. I can't do that stuff that the skinny girls on the magazine covers do. I can't do it, right? So I have my own kind of physical therapy practice for my body, but the core of my practice, my spiritual practice, is meditation and breathing, right? It's the stuff you can do standing, sitting, closing your eyes on the subway, right? You can do it anywhere. You can do it lying down. I've done a lot of lying down practice when my body just hurts, right? Like it's the stuff that's really accessible to anybody in wheelchairs, hospital beds, right? That's the stuff that has helped me the most. Yeah.
And, and it's important to say that because we are so conditioned. One of the things that brown girls get the ones of us who are first and who are onlys, we become overachievers. And so what I love about this book is that you give people permission to lay some of that stuff down in order for their well-being to come forth. And so it really matters. Yes. Hi.
Thank you, darling.
Yes.
I'm Anuradha's mom. And, oh gosh, I'm so proud of her. When she brought before us the program for joining the Marine Corps, we looked at the program and, it looks okay. I mean, let her join the Marine Corps. So, and then she would share some details with me. Say, Mama, I'm doing 80 push-ups a day. Mama, I carry 80 pounds on my back. And I said, oh my God, what's going on? And so more details, and so I had to see a psychiatrist because I was sort of worried. But at some stage, I don't know at what stage, I think after she left the Marine Corps or what, she wrote to me, Mama, are you sitting? I said, yes, what is it now? Said, I've got a puppy, and it's a Rottweiler, and I'm going to call her Shiva. I said, okay, I'm so happy for you. After a few weeks, months, Mama, are you sitting? I said, what is it now? Oh, I've got another puppy, and it's a Labrador, and I'm going to call her Uma. Wow, Shiva and Uma. These two puppies, along with yoga, I think they sort of provided her with the affection and the intimacy and the daily routine, which sort of brought her alive. And the dogs are no longer with us, but I do remember them. And it's, for me, a very proud moment. I'm reading the book and I'm sharing so much of the details which I was not aware of when she was in the Marine Corps. Thank you, Anu. I love you.
Hi, Anuradha. Congratulations.
Hi, Kate.
So it's a personal memoir, but you take on a branch of the government in the book. Can you talk about the hurdles of doing that, being able to say the truth, but also having to be careful about what you say?
Yeah, thanks for your question. Kate's also a writer. Well, there were lawyers involved. I'll start there. Great legal team. I think in the end, I named about 140 people in the book. And by that, I mean everybody from, my friends to people who I would call predators. And it was sort of, I wanted to tell the truth. I wanted to tell the truth about myself, I don't see myself as heroic in any way. I see myself as somebody who is trying to do the right thing and was very human and made mistakes and learned. And so I had to kind of take every scene and every human being that I involved in this memoir and examine, am I being fair to this person? Am I being fair to myself? I remember the first draft of the manuscript I wrote, and by the way, thank you, Daniela Wexler, who's my editor, who is an incredible editor. But one of the pieces of feedback I got early on was, God, you're isolating your readers. And when you're filled with rage about institutions that have hurt you or other people, I don't know why I'm saying you when I am, right? I just let it all out. But there had to be a moment, and it took many months of kind of reflecting and healing and breathing and reflecting, that my readers weren't the ones who hurt me, right? Like, there's no need to bring all of that to them. It's, it's where can I find the compassion? Where can I remember I have something in common with everybody? And that's hard work, right? When you feel so isolated. I felt so alone, right? But I didn't need to, particularly not all the time.
Yeah. Yes.
Congratulations. So I got here a few minutes late. So if I ask a question you guys have already covered, then I apologize. But I'm sort of curious about, given everything you went through in the Marines and afterwards, if you were to go back and make this decision again, would you join? And then how does that decision kind of inform when you speak to other young women about a decision to join the Marines or other branches of the military?
Go read Sebastian's book. What's the title again, Sebastian?
The Away Game.
The Away Game, if you're a soccer fan. That's a great question. I would definitely do it again in a heartbeat. If I had to be I probably would have joined a different branch of service because I wanted to stay in longer, right? And I don't think that for me, regardless of my age, a career in the Marine Corps would have been sustainable. I think women are up against too much for me to be able to handle. Probably the Navy, Air Force would have been a great fit or a better fit, because I think that the temperament, the personality of those branches is a little more my style. I absolutely encourage women to join every day. A lot of family members come to me, moms and dads, some folks who are interested in joining, men and women. I had a South Asian guy who was interested in being a Marine Corps JAG approached me. Again, and this is out of the blue, right? Just emailed me out of the blue. And we had a 2-hour-long conversation about what it would be like for him to serve. And I still don't know if he went off to officer candidate school. But I try and be really positive, right? Positive and realistic. Because we need more women and we need more people of color and we need more queer people to join the military, right? Like, if it were not for me joining, then I wouldn't have had the experiences I had and been able to connect to people who had even worse experiences, right? And all of my experiences were not all bad. They're incredibly rewarding. And one of the most rewarding things about me joining was meeting incredible people whom I would not have met if I had stayed in either the bubble of New York City or whatever it is I was going to end up doing in probably academia, just remarkable people who I'm still in touch with, who changed my life for the better. Yeah, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks.
Did you fear the enemy more or the people within your ranks?
If I'm completely honest, I felt intimidated by a lot of the men I served with, and I think that was part of the system. That was it. And so I wore a lot of layers for many years. I had a thick suit of armor on. And when I was going through some really harsh stuff, particularly the harassment investigation at my last unit, and I still had to, I was a company commander, which means I had to lead 400 Marines. And it was a very, was kind of a high risk job. We had live fire ranges where, the kids were learning how to throw grenades and shooting machine guns. And so, like we had to worry about, people not dying, right? And so, and yet my humanity was being kind of challenged by some very powerful people in uniform while I was showing up to work and supervising all of these Marines. And it's still hard to talk about because I lose my train of thought, as I just did.
Did you fear the enemy or the people that you serve with?
And so, I mean, one of the things I keep on coming back to, even as even as this book is coming out, is I have to remind myself of my strength. Like I sometimes I just forget it all. People are like, oh, you were a Marine. And I don't even know what they're talking about, right? But I am strong, but I have fierce female friends. And by fierce, I don't mean like violent. I mean very loving female friends and male friends who continuously remind me I am a strong, good person. I'm doing good work in the world, right? And I know that sounds maybe insane to some folks, but this is what I need. This is also my practice. Yeah.
We got time for one more question.
Hey, Anuradha. Hi. So earlier, and then again just now, you were talking about the one person asked, like, would you do it again? And you talked about, like, it doesn't sound like, is it sustainable for women to be in the Marines? And you were saying you would possibly have chosen a different branch of the military. But my question is kind of more general, like, is it even that sustainable as it is, like, for men, for big, white, burly men? Like, I just, having, no understanding of what it's really like, and I really can't wait to start reading the book to get your perspective. But, what overall changes need to start happening on a, not just focused on women and minorities, but just in general within the Marines and the military to make it sustainable so that we don't have veterans, whatever they may look like, whatever form they are, coming out and not being able to cope anymore?
Yeah, I love that question. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this goes to the heart of what Brittany has been alluding to about militarization, period. I mean, I personally think, and I write a lot about this in my last chapter, I think any time you inculcate a human being into violence, and particularly for me, I'll talk about my experience. And, I did not shoot or kill anyone, but I have many friends who've experienced what that is like. And, we have a country right now which does not talk about being at war, does not regularly remind ourselves that there are children volunteering to serve, young people volunteering to serve in a time of war, that we are deployed in many places around the world today. And that should be a part of our regular dinner conversation, and it's not. And what does that mean? And so, yes, I worry about all the people who are serving, and I know many of those big burly white veterans that you're talking about. Some of them are in this room, and I would like to see a society which embraces people's full humanity, so that they can talk about or process whatever it is they saw or did or witnessed. Because if we can't, I mean, what's the point, right? Like, we're not machines, we're human beings, and I've just seen so much pain, and it doesn't have to be this way. Yeah.
You have offered yourself to us in an incredibly brave and courageous way, and I think your book will save lives, because I think it will remind people that you can heal, that there is life after, that there are other ways to do this, that we can change things. And so I salute you. I thank you for this work. And I thank you for sharing with us tonight.
Thank you, Brittany.
Thank you. gonna sign some books. She's gonna sign books. And so we're gonna take instruction from the Strand. So please buy her book, read it, and get her to sign it.
Brittany, thank you so much. Anuradha, thank you very, very much.